Hi everyone, welcome back to Visually Hidden Selects. I'm Peter O'Brien, and today I would like to talk to you about The Shining from 1980, directed by Stanley Kubrick and starring Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Danny Lloyd, and Scatman Crothers. This film is based on a book of the same name written by Stephen King, and while I'm certain that he was happy to sell the film rights to his third consecutive novel, it's very well known that he was not happy with the result of this film. It's almost more inspired by than based on the book because of all the liberties that are taken, and just about every iconic or memorable scene or situation in this film is unique to this film. The script was actually written by Stanley Kubrick and a woman named Diane Johnson, who was a novelist that Stanley Kubrick brought in to just kind of help adapt the material. And she actually did retain some elements from Stephen King's novel that were then subsequently exercised from the film project. And this film is also a lot more abstract and psychological than the book. I remember when I first saw the film, it really left me with a lot more questions that I felt I would find answers to in the book, and I didn't. But if the film was a carbon copy of the book, why would you bother reading it, you know? So I think Stanley Kubrick actually did Stephen King a big favor by raising so many questions that he didn't have answers to. And the book doesn't necessarily answer either, but again, it probably didn't hurt sales very much. The basic premise for the film and the book follows Jack Torrance, who is a former school teacher / recovering alcoholic / aspiring writer who gets hired as the winter caretaker for a beautiful, picturesque mountain resort hotel. And he brings his family along with him, and his plan is to just research and write a new novel over the course of the winter without any disturbances. Those plans go awry when the hotel turns out to be haunted, and it starts to take a hold of Jack. Meanwhile, his son, who has telepathic abilities, starts to pick up on the vibes of the hotel as well, and things just kind of spiral out of control from there. Although this film was primarily shot entirely in England, the establishing shot of the hotel for the film is actually the Timberline Lodge in Mount Hood, Oregon. I've actually been to the Timberline Lodge in Oregon, and it is a pretty ominous sight, especially with the weight of this film behind it. But once you step foot inside, it is totally different. Another thing that Stephen King didn't really like about this particular film version was that Jack Nicholson was cast as Jack Torrance, because it's very, very easy to see him going over the edge or being considered crazy before the fact. Stephen King kind of felt that was telegraphing a little bit. He wanted more of a Jon Voight kind of actor where he could be sympathetic, but then when he turns, it's really, really jarring and shocking to the audience. But this is really Stanley Kubrick's interpretation of the book, and we're just buying tickets and taking the ride. And Jack does a fantastic job. He's just a lot of fun to watch, especially in this film. I got the opportunity to see this in the theater, and even though I had watched it on video and television for decades, it was like I had never seen it before on the big screen because of all the nuances that were coming through in Jack's performance, and particularly in his facial expressions. And even though Jack Nicholson is the star, Shelley Duvall and Danny Lloyd are really kind of the standouts in this film because, again, you're almost expecting Jack to go insane. You're waiting for it. So it's really, what's the reaction going to be to that performance? And Shelley Duvall really comes across in this film. And part of it is kind of a sad story. Stanley Kubrick really sort of took advantage of her psychologically during the course of making this film. He is notorious for doing a lot of takes, and he would go in excess of that with all of the actors, but with Shelley Duvall, it was almost like finding her breaking point and then surpassing it, because her character really had to be broken and on the edge, and it comes across, but there was a price to pay. And you can watch interviews with her where she realizes it after the fact. It didn't make the experience of the movie all that great, but the result is really, really present in the film. And Danny Lloyd, who plays Jack and Wendy's son, Danny Torrance, he also just does a great job. This is really his first film, and he really is fantastic. I mean, you want to talk about shining, he shines in this movie, both metaphorically speaking and literally speaking. He is just a standout character and a standout performance in this film. The wild card in this film is Scatman Crothers, who plays Dick Halloran, who's the chef at the hotel, and he and Danny really share a very significant bond in this film. The first time they meet, Dick reveals that he too has this ability which he calls shining. And that is basically a telepathic connection to communicate with people. But I think my favorite thing about this film, and the reason why I go back and watch it again and again, is because of the cinematography. It is a beautifully shot film. And because of his background in photography, a lot of Stanley Kubrick films have a very particular look, and they are very unique photographically. Even if he works with a particular cinematographer, it's still a Stanley Kubrick look and a Stanley Kubrick feel. And one thing that was really kind of new in regard to this film was the Steadicam. It had recently been invented, and Stanley Kubrick employed the heck out of it in this particular film, utilizing it to move freely throughout the hotel corridors and around the elaborate sets without having to lay a ton of dolly track. And it gave these smooth, ethereal, flowing shots that really almost make it as though there's another character in the film. It's almost as though the hotel is showing you what's happening in this film. But this film makes excellent use of the Steadicam, particularly in the hedge maze, which is a featured attraction of the hotel that is unique to the film. That's part of the psychological element of this interpretation of the story. And like most other Kubrick films, pretty much every single frame can be isolated as its own photographic work of art. Really, just the composition and the lens and the lighting and then the blocking and the performance that is going on in it. It just all comes together photographically, and I think the implementation of the Steadicam really just broadens that photographic playground for the viewer. I think my favorite scene in this film is when Wendy finally discovers exactly what Jack has been writing. It's really a turning point in their relationship specifically, and it's just masterfully acted by both Jack and Shelley Duvall. They go to their respective extremes with their characters, and it's such a great dramatic tug of war that they go through, and it's punctuated with this incredible tracking shot, again with the Steadicam, throughout one of the main sets of the film. I just love it so much from beginning to end. Like, once she steps into the room until that scene ends is magic. I think one of the most interesting things about this film is that The Shining is highly regarded as one of the greatest horror films ever made. But when it first came out, it received mixed reviews, and funny enough, Stanley Kubrick and Shelley Duvall were both nominated for Razzies at the first annual Golden Raspberry Awards for Worst Director and Worst Leading Actress. Shelley Duvall's nomination was subsequently retracted when it was discovered just exactly what she had to endure during the making of the film, but nevertheless, it's funny how perceptions change over time, and I think that's just partially because Stanley Kubrick was ahead of his time, and that's why his films hold up so well and span time and continue to inspire filmmakers and storytellers alike. So that's it for The Shining. I really hope you like this recommendation, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future selections. If you do check out The Shining, please leave us a comment and let us know what you think of the film. We will be discussing it on the next Visually Hidden Selects podcast, so be sure to tune into that. And until next time, see ya!